Hello.
Hi everyone. We're so happy to see. No, well, not see you, but just be here with you. I'm Mayra Cuevas. I am the author of Salty Bittersweet, a YA
Yay.
foodie romance, and Ismée.
Hello. I have my book right here. Thank you, everybody,
So
for tuning in.
thank you so much for tuning in. The reason we wanted to do this was to try to stay connected. And we know everybody right now is super anxious and stressed out, and we're all feeling insecure and dealing with our own stuff. So we really wanted to create a small space when we can all come together and just have a moment to just do something semi-normal and talk the things that we love, writing and books and publishing.
Yes, which I'm sorry, I'm distracted because I have children bouncing around, as I'm sure many of you do as well in your houses and apartments. And they were told to be quiet, and they're trying, but then they slipped and fell on some pillows. So, um, yeah. So
So
we're
we want
here.
to, yeah, we're here. We want to hear from you guys. There's a chat option available. Oh, you guys already found it. Awesome. So we definitely want to hear where you guys are from. We got some folks checking in from Canada, LA, California. Oh my God, this is so awesome. We have some Musas in the house,
Oh, amazing. Cool.
Virginia. So as you're watching, go check out the Musas website. It's lastmusasbooks.com and meet other Musas. The 2020 releases are book events pretty much all got canceled. So please support
Yes,
other authors out there.
appropriately canceled, but
Yeah.
nonetheless sad for all of us. But we can meet here and we can talk. So Myra and I thought that it would be really great if we just talked to you guys about our book journey, sort of how we got to this place, how we became published, because sometimes people think that there's this sort of mystery behind, well, how does somebody become an author? And it's not always directly easy. Um, but
And just to keep it in perspective, like only 1% of the manuscripts that are submitted to publishing houses get published. So it is super hard to get published. We get it, but it's not impossible. So don't feel like, oh my God, my dreams are never going to come true. Like for me, for example, it took me more than 6 years of trying to finally land a book deal. What was it like? How many years was it for you, Ismay?
it was 5 years. Yep.
So
five
I
years to
had,
get an agent and then a book deal. So yeah, I mean, we talked about this before. One of the things that, like, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to aspiring authors is just don't give up, because if you give up, it will never happen. But if you keep going, and you keep striving, then I mean, that's how I got here. That's how I
yeah,
got
I
this.
mean,
So
yeah. And it feels pretty darn good to hold your own book. Like if that is
it
like the
does.
best
Yeah.
feeling ever. So
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
we're gonna be talking. We have some talking points that we've prepared for you guys. But in the meantime, we also in between our talking points, we want to answer your questions. So as we're
Hmm.
talking, please just put in your questions on the chat app, and we'll answer them as we go.
All right, cool.
So, okay, so let's do the first thing. So what made you decide to become a writer, Ismay?
So excellent question. Um, So I know some people think like, oh, well, when they're like from the time they were little, they thought, oh, I want to really be a writer. That wasn't the case for me. I actually, when I was a little kid, when I was like 12 or 10, if you'd asked me what I wanted to do, I would have said I want to be a doctor. And I think part of that was because my mother was a doctor, my abuela was a doctor. So, and I saw them doctoring and loving what they did, and I said I want to be a doctor. So actually, I did become a doctor. And then I was doctoring for a while, and I was actually pregnant with my third baby. This was 2010, and I was put on bed rest. And at that point, I picked up a novel. It was a young adult novel, and I read a fiction novel for the first time in about 11 years. Up until then, I had been reading medical literature and New England Journal of Medicine and things like that. And just the act of reading that novel was, I don't know, it was like almost transformative for me. It just opened up this, like this hole it like made a hole through like the glass wall that I had built to try and keep all my emotions in check. And that was something that I think I consciously did as a physician. I'm a pediatrician. And I thought to survive being a doctor, I'm going to need to, not let my emotions go crazy and just be really professional and sort of keep, keep all those emotions discreet from showing up on my face. But what I loved about reading the book is that it just let everything come out. It was a safe space. And I thought, I would really love to do that. I would love to write something that is so moving that it allows the reader to feel those emotions that maybe they don't feel comfortable feeling in any other space in their lives. And so that's when my journey started. And so I was 38 at the time. And yeah, and then it was a long time. It was a long haul from them, but I didn't give up. I kept going. And yeah. And so how about you, Mayra? When did you decide you wanted to be a doctor? I mean, a writer.
So, I mean, I've always written, and I kind of make this joke that when I was growing up, I used to read a ton of Latin American authors, and usually there's this history in Latin America that, and if you want to become an author, you have to be a journalist first. So the entire time I was growing up, I was like, okay, if I'm going to write, I have to be a journalist. If I'm going to be a journalist, I got to do it big. I got to work at CNN. So I became a writer producer for CNN when I was like 24, and now I'm turning 40 on Monday. So I've been there for a really long time, 16 years. Yay! Happy Corona birthday to me. Yes. So yes, so I've been working in journalism, and I have been writing other people's stories for a really long time and producing other people's stories for TV for a really long time. So it got to the point, I think when I was in my 30s, I just decided, you know what, now it's time for me to do the story that I want to do, which is, it was fiction. And I would say, Serena, Sasha, Simone, Annie, I'm seeing your questions. Keep them coming. We're going to get to them in a little bit because we actually have sections set up for those. So yeah, so I started, and when I started, I had no freaking clue what I was doing. I had played around with poetry and some short stories, but I don't have an MFA. I didn't take any creative writing classes in school, so I had to teach myself how to write fiction. And I actually relied. I went to my local bookstore, and I sat in front of the creative writing section, and I just started picking up books. And I actually have some of them here. I read, so Story Genius is one of the books that I read. That was super helpful. And I actually have some handouts that we're gonna give out a little bit later. I read The Breakout Novelist by Donald Mass. That was super helpful as well. Save the Cats right here. Another big one to help plot. And story engineering, I also use that a lot. And I have a form that I grabbed from that book that I'm going to share with everybody in a few minutes. So I basically had to teach myself how to structure a novel, because as you know, reading a novel and structuring a novel are completely different things. So how did you teach yourself how to write fiction, Ismée?
Well, I feel like I kind of didn't. I like you, I had been doing a lot of writing for my other job. So I am a pediatric cardiologist, but I also did a lot of clinical research. So I had to write grants, and I had to write abstracts and medical papers for medical journals. And I was doing that for a very long time, but I did not know how to write fiction. In fact, the funny story is that it took me 3 months to write my first draft of my first manuscript, my first fiction manuscript. Just 3 months. I was still pregnant. I knew I had 3 months until the baby came. And I was just sitting in the bed. So I just wrote it really fast. And then it took me 4 years to learn how to edit it. I was so basic. It didn't even occur to me that I probably shouldn't use the exact same word in the same sentence, like basic things like that I was learning. And then I put that manuscript aside after I tried for 5 years to, I edited it, tried to get an agent. I couldn't get an agent with that first manuscript. And then I wrote a second manuscript, and it was that manuscript that was Water and May that got me my agent, got me published. And it wasn't until I was writing this one which which I sold the idea for and pitched, that I actually decided to start to read some books like what you just showed.
So
sort of how to plot.
Yeah, the slide right now of the books some of the books that I've used and that I know Ismée has looked at some of these and we kind of recommend. And let's talk a little bit because folks are asking a little bit of the difference between plotting and pantsing. I am a total, admittedly, I'm a control freak. I just am, and I'm okay with that. I think at 40, I am okay saying I am a control freak. So I like when I start writing, having an idea of where the story is going to go for several reasons. One, I don't have a lot of time to write because I have a full-time job and I also have a lot of family commitments and I am on the board of a nonprofit. So when I sit down to write, I want to know what I'm writing, like what is supposed to happen in the scene I'm working on. So what I'll do is I'll start crafting. I have a little sketch that I use. I'm going to share the file with you guys. It's a very simple 4-part story structure plotting template. I just shared the document with you. And I'm also going to share, I got a couple more documents for Story Genius, so you guys should be seeing those now. So basically, I will use they're drafting roadmaps. They help me develop characters, that make sure that the story idea is viable for an entire book. So sometimes we have these ideas that we think, oh, this would be great to turn into a book, but is it viable for 80,000 words, for 90,000 words? Can this be a story with beginning, middle, and end, and a story that's not gonna just fall away or sag in the middle? It's something that you can develop through the various parts of a novel. What do you do, Ismée?
Yeah, so I tried to highlight. Ani asked about plotters and pantsers, and so I'm not sure if everybody can see this now as a question, but just a quick definition. A plotter is a writer who really tries to outline all the different elements of the novel before they start to actually sit down and write the whole novel. A pantser is somebody who flies by the seat of their pants, and they just sort of have an idea, or they have a spark or a character, and then they just sit down and they write and it comes to them. If you ask a lot of writers, I would say that most writers say that they're somewhere in between, which is the answer that I'm going to give. I definitely like to have a rough outline. And so what I do is, and it's funny, I actually did do this for Water in May, my first book. I had gone to a writer's conference, the SCBWI Winter Conference in New York City, and I had the great fortune to have a breakout session with Lynn Oliver, who's an amazing person, and she's an amazing author. And we were sitting around this big round table, and she was describing how she uses the 3-act structure to plot all of her works, because she writes for TV as well, and does screenplays. And Lynn said she doesn't like to write extra, and if she doesn't plot, she finds that she writes things that end up getting cut because they're not relevant to the theme or to the character arc. Yeah. So she mentioned this thing called the 3-act structure. And I think there were 10 of us in this small group, and we all looked at her like with little fawn eyes. And she said, "Do you guys not know what that is?" And we said, "Not really. Can you show us?" And she just took a piece of paper, a legal piece of paper, ripped it out, and she drew 2 lines in the middle of it to make 3 sections. And then she walked us through how you would do that if you were going to write. Her example was Peter Rabbit. She said what she would think of is, so, all right, I've got this rabbit, and the conflict is he wants to get in the garden, but there's this farmer, he doesn't want him in the garden, and his mother tells him no. So I know there's going to be a scene in the garden where he almost gets caught, and that's going to be sort of like my climax of the story, and that's going to be at the end of Act 2. And so she would write that down at the bottom. And then she just went in and she filled in scenes, and she said that's how the book comes to her, sort of like these sort of little interesting scenes. For Water in May, because it was based off of my work as a pediatric cardiologist, the story was very linear to me in my head. I knew exactly what was happening, and so I could keep a lot of those details in my head, and I plotted it very roughly, but in not a lot of detail. For This Train Is Being Held, I did I acted more like what Lynn does. So because I had the premise of, okay, we're going to have two teens who are from very different parts of New York City, and they're going to meet and fall in love on the New York City subway. And then there are going to be all these things that are going to pull them apart, right? That's what happens in the romance. You have to create the tension and pull them apart. And so then I sat down, this was the fun part, was thinking like, oh, what kind of cool scenes could happen on the subway? And actually for that one, I made index cards. I made a bunch of index cards. And obviously I came up with like too many ideas. And then I had to winnow them down to what makes sense, or, this is too similar to this. And I remembered assembling it on the dining room table. I spent an entire day where I had all my index cards of ideas for scenes, and I put them all down, and then I winnowed it down and put them into the 3 acts. And then when I had winnowed it down, I went to my Scrivener. Is it a program? Is it an app? It's a way that I write. It's great. I think we have a slide where I show you.
I'm pulling it up right now. And then if you are writing romance, a book that I used that was super helpful is Writing the Romantic Comedy. It's actually meant for screenwriters, but you can take all of the concepts and use it as you're working on your manuscript. When you're writing, it's very different, I guess. When you're writing just for the fun of it at the beginning, you have all this time, but sometimes when you're writing under deadline, you just have to crank out the work a little bit faster. So definitely helps to have to have the plotting of a manuscript. And of course the plot changes, like when I started working on Salty Bittersweet, the original plot structure that I had, it was completely different than how the book ended up being. It was different characters, different premise. So you use it as a jumping point, and then as the story changes, you change with it. But it's I have found to be very helpful to just make sure that your book is just, again, not sagging in the middle, and that you're hitting all the points in your story that you need to be hitting.
And I also like doing it because it just gives me something very concrete to do every single day. So, most writers don't write full time. Most writers have and even if they do write full time, they have other things in their lives, like families or other obligations. And so you usually carve out a specific amount of time in your week when you're going to write, and you want that time to be productive. And so it was really helpful. I looked at my plot outline almost as a, like, so I could set goals for myself. Like, okay, today I'm going to write this scene. And, I've heard other authors say like they weren't feeling in the mood to write one type of scene, so they would jump ahead and they'd write this other scene that they were really looking forward to doing. And I've done that a little bit, but in general, I tend to stick to the format to go in line. Can you all see?
So, yeah, no, sorry, it's my fault. I kind of put up a slide.
Oh, okay. I was like,
yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so let's talk. I want to make sure that we're answering some of the questions that we got coming in. So please keep them coming in. Christina, please let us know where you're dialing in from. Is asking, do you think you'll ever go back to your original manuscript? Probably not.
Yeah, I tried. I have to say, I tried, and I tried twice. I sent it. It's funny because my original manuscript I sent to my current agent, and he rejected me. But that was like 3 years. And then 3 years later, I sent him my second manuscript. And I think he'd forgotten about my first manuscript, and he took me on my second manuscript. But then I dug it out and I sent it to him last summer, 2 summers ago. And he reread it, and we tried to tinker with it. And then we just decided it's perhaps best to leave in the attic for like my great grandchildren to stumble upon, and to be like, what is this drivel? I don't know.
So my first manuscript got rejected by over 200 agents. Yeah, that's right, people. 200 agents. So it will probably never see the light of day. It was a fantasy manuscript that my husband, when he read it, he said it had too many weird names and no one could keep up what was going on. So I thought it was great. Everybody else clearly thought it was awful. And we're getting a lot of questions about dealing with agents.
Yeah, so well, it gets the agents, but so with the being awful, right? There's 2 things. So the premise. So Isabella asked the idea of the first manuscript. My agent actually told me that the idea and the premise was good, but he said, I think, to paraphrase him, He said, your writing has evolved so much and it's so much stronger now. You'd really have to start from the beginning. Like just trash that first manuscript and start over with, you could use the same characters, same ideas, but just write it again because your writing now, he said, your writing now is just better.
Yes,
and that's another reason to keep
that happened to me too. Yeah.
Keep writing and to keep I remember that was such a frustrating piece of advice when I was pre-published. That was a term Lynn Oliver used, by the way, and I love that term. I'm pre-published. I'm not published yet because you're going to get published. So if you're pre-published, I hated when people said, just keep writing, just keep writing, just keep writing. But I did that, and you know what? It worked. So don't despair, don't lose hope, just keep writing, because the act of writing, you will get better. And also keep reading. Make sure you're reading all different types of genres, but also specifically the genre that you are writing in, so that you understand what other people are doing and what's out there, and what not necessarily what the competition is, but you need to know what's comparable to your work, so that when you submit to an agent or an editor, you can say, this is a novel that is like Hunger Games with Twilight, or you want to have comps that everybody recognizes.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how we got our agents, how we did our query letter, because I can see there's a lot of questions about this on the queue. So let me tell you about what my experience was. So that first manuscript, I kept like a spreadsheet. Again, because we go back, I just want you to know I am a control freak. I keep things super neatly organized because this is how I can just tackle my life. So another author here in Georgia sent me her spreadsheet. So I kept a spreadsheet of the name of the agent, the date that I had sent the manuscript, and the date that I had received a rejection, or if I had received a request for my manuscript, and then what was, if they were reading it or considering it, or if they had, again, rejected it. And then I kept dates for follow-ups. So I kept all of this stuff organized in a spreadsheet. And if I find it somewhere, it's probably not on this computer, but I'll try to share it if I find it.
Yeah, I had the same thing. But so, you know what? You can do Query Tracker now too online.
Oh,
like you can sign up and they do that for you. I didn't look carefully, but I assume you pay a small fee. But you can click agents, and then it's almost like the common application now for colleges. I think you can be like, submit to this agent, and it'll keep it all in line for you.
So, you can do that. You can use just a simple spreadsheet. And before I forget, we do have two agent sessions next week. They're kind of back to back. I'm going to put it up where it's a live Q&A with my agent, Sarisa Hernandez, who is absolutely amazing. I love that woman. For me, she's like a fairy madrina, godmother agent. And then Ismée is doing a Q&A with her agent, Jim McCarthy, who is amazing. So if you join us for one of those or both of them, and bring all your questions. So then I started looking online. I looked on Twitter, and this was before PidMat, before all of that stuff. So I was looking on Twitter.
That is for people who don't know what PidMat is.
You want to go ahead? Go ahead. You can go ahead and explain it.
Well, I did it a couple of times. It's a Twitter movement. It happens like twice a year, I think, where agents basically post on Twitter what they're looking for or what they're interested in, and then aspiring writers can tweet to them, or they follow that link and they pitch their manuscript to the agents, and some agents will then directly respond to them or retweet and say, yes, send me that sounds interesting. It's like a fun, crazy day. And I did it, and then I got an agent who wanted it, but after I looked her up, she didn't seem like she would have been a good fit. And I think she wasn't somebody who was going to make me pay to read her work, but that is definitely something that some agents do. And if an agent ever asks you to pay them for them to read, that's not legit. Don't do that.
So basically,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just basically going in and creating a list of people I wanted to submit to based on what were they, saying. The manuscript wish list website, I would go in and check what are people asking for there. I would also go writers conferences, and then
Oh, for
pay
sure.
to meet with agents and editors at writers conferences. Most writers conferences have slots that you can meet with folks and query them in person. And so I created this massive list. And I knew that when the story was right and the right agent would come along, that it would just happen very quickly. And it didn't happen with my first manuscript. Like I said, my first manuscript was completely rejected. And I got advice from another authors, just put it aside and write something completely different, something that gets you excited and that it's new. So I wrote a second manuscript. That manuscript actually ended up getting me several agents requested it. Saritza got it. I think she got it on a Friday, and by Tuesday I had an offer of representation. So when things align and the work is good and you find somebody who is excited about you and excited about your work and excited to work with you, it's just all comes together pretty quickly. How long did it take you to get an offer, Ismée?
With that second manuscript, I got an agent within 3 months. Yeah, but so Mayra, tell us about that day. Like, how did you know that Saritza wanted it? Like, that's a fun thing to talk about, right? Was it an email?
Oh,
Did she call you?
yeah, so it was really funny because she, and she'd probably kill me if I say this now, but I actually completely ignored her submission guidelines. I was supposed to go through the
But you're
through
the
the
control freak.
website.
How did you do that? Like, I
I
don't understand.
know. I just, the website said you had to submit through the website, but I don't know. I kind of have this feeling about her because I really, I'm from Puerto Rico and she's from Puerto Rico. And I was like, when I saw what she wanted and I read her bio, I just felt this thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I have this feeling. So I took a chance and I emailed her directly. And she told me she opened the email and she was about to tell me you have to go through the website. But then she read it and she loved the story so much that she was like, oh, send me the manuscript. So, first of all, I was super excited that I sent it to her. And then on Monday, I got another email saying, hey, like, I read it over the weekend and then I was floored. And then she said, oh, I loved it. Can we talk tomorrow? And then I like screamed, and my husband and I work together. So I ran to his office and I'm like, oh my God, an agent wants to talk to me. Like,
Yeah,
what do I do? What do I do?
that's
So
awesome.
I created a list. I talked to, I have a awesome author community, super supportive author community. So here in Atlanta, so I talked to some of the other authors, and I'm like, okay, like, what should I be asking this person who wants to represent me? What are some of the things that and I looked online, questions to ask an agent during an interview. So I got my list of questions together, and I'll post them during the Ask Agent webinar. I'll make sure to have those with me along with the spreadsheet. And then we just, for an hour, we talked. And then by the end of it, she was making me an offer of representation, and I just couldn't fucking believe it. It was amazing. It was the beginning of just a great relationship, and that's what your relationship with your agent should be. You should think of it not in terms of one book, but in terms of your writing career.
Your
Can you
career,
work
for sure.
with this person on multiple books? Because I will tell you, this was about 4 years ago. My first book that she read, that book did not sell. So imagine like the just soul crushing disappointment that I finally get my dream agent. We finally go on submission and the damn thing does not sell. I mean, it was just awful, but it happens. And then you just got to move on. That's why you got to keep writing. So while that one was
Hmm.
on submission, I was already writing what became Salty Bittersweet. And Salty Bittersweet sold right away. We actually had interest from several big five houses, which was amazing. Blank HarperCollins ended up buying it, which has just been a dream. They've been incredible to work with. But yeah, I mean, we have, from then, we're now working on our fourth project. We just started work. We're in the process of working. So think of it in terms of a career, not just of one book. How about you, Ismée?
For sure. For sure. The other piece of advice before I forget it is that look up, try and figure out who the agents are of writers that you like. So, or writers who are writing stories that somebody said writers who are writing stories that are similar to yours, that could backfire because some agents will be like, okay, well, I already have somebody who does that. But so I just ended up reaching out to the agents of writers that I liked and writers whose books I had read. So I could say, oh my gosh, you know, Lainey Taylor's agent, I forget who that person is, but I would write to that person, say, I've read The Daughter of Smoke and Bone, is like one of my favorite books ever. And I love this, other, you know, to make the agent feel proud of bringing that book to light, which is complete honesty. And that's always a helpful thing to sort of personalize your approach to the agents and to make them keep notice. But I'm trying to remember with I remember with Jim, that was back before we had 3 pets. And so now I write in my apartment because I have to walk the dog and do all that stuff, which is great, it's great. We love the dog. But before we had all the pets, I used to go to the library at Columbia University's Teacher College because I worked at Columbia University, so I could get into this really fantastic library and I would be so productive. So I was actually there writing and I was working. And I got an email from Jim saying, hey, are you available to jump on a call in the next half hour? And I was like, oh, what is that? Like, oh my gosh, like this is a literary agent who wants to get on the phone with me. So then I had to leave the area of the library where I was working because it was the quiet area and I had to go out sort of into the stairwell. And I got on the phone with him and he was calling from his apartment, which was in Brooklyn, and I could barely hear him. And it was like coming in and out. And I thought he was giving me an offer representation, but I wasn't sure. And so I was like really excited, but also like, am I completely misunderstanding what's going on here? Because we were like breaking up and I couldn't really talk very loudly. I think he was like whispering because I was in the library. But it's a great feeling, especially after working so hard for that goal for such a long time to, you know, and it's hard because, you know, your friends and your family, they read what you write and they're saying, oh, this is so great, keep going. And, you know, part of me was always wondering like, okay, well, I know these people who love me like it, but will actual strangers like what I write? And so to finally get that from an agent, that's for a lot of writers, that's often the first truly external validation that you get. So it's really special when it happens.
Yeah, it's that first level of gatekeepers. And I want to make sure we're answering some of these questions. Simone is asking, did you have your books already written when you approached your agents? Yes. So my manuscript was not only completely written, I had feedback from several beta readers. So these are not family and friends. These are other writers and authors in my local community here that had looked, they had given me feedback. And for the manuscript that got picked up by my agent, I even went as far as hiring a freelance editor, which is something you can do. It can get a little bit costly, but I'm sure now with the coronavirus and everybody, you know, potentially having financial troubles, you could probably get somebody to give you a deal and you know, edit your manuscript and help you, you know, get it to where it needs to be for submission for agents.
I did that too with my first manuscript that didn't sell. I actually got Laura Ruby to edit it. This was before she was famous and like won the Prince Honor and became a National Book Award finalist. This was how long ago this was. But she gave me my first editorial letter and I used that letter ever since. Whenever I'm editing the work of my writer's critique group, I use her outline. It's so fantastic. So it's all a learning experience. It really is all a learning experience. But so for an agent, if you're writing fiction, you definitely need your full manuscript because the agent is going to want to see what you're capable of. It might be different. I'm not sure about this, but if you want to write nonfiction, which by the way, I have not written that. I don't know, Mayra, if you have written that yet.
No, I haven't. But I honestly do not have a lot of experience with nonfiction, and it's like
it's actually a booming field right now in young adult and kid lit. So if you want to write nonfiction, it might be different. And the reason I say that is that when you get a book deal for a nonfiction book, you usually only write a proposal or a part of it. Whereas if you were going to get a book deal for a fiction novel, you have to submit the entire manuscript to the publisher. They have to see the whole thing. If it's your first, interaction with them.
Yeah, you got to have something that is literally polished and ready to go because agents are, agents don't have time to go into huge developmental edits, so they want it as finished as possible. Kathleen is asking, where are you dialing in, Kathleen? Please let us know. We want to know where everybody is right now. To, you know, just to see what parts of the world everybody's dialing in. So how do you find the editors review your manuscripts? So I actually, another Atlanta author who is now very famous, she recommended somebody that she used for her original manuscript. So I would recommend that you start building a writers and authors community around it, because a lot of the things that I'm recommending right now are advice that I got from other people in my writing community. Like I would just reach out to folks and saying, hey, I'm thinking about maybe using a developmental editor to help me with this manuscript. Can you guys refer someone? Has anybody worked with anybody before? So I would just try to start building this community. You can do it on Twitter, you know, you can do it on social media, or you can do it in person. But that's usually how I find folks.
And I would highly recommend, presuming everybody here is interested in writing books for kids, whether it's a picture book, early reader, a chapter book, middle grade, young adult, all of that entire category, usually it's like the same type of agent, not always, but if it is that entire category, you should all consider joining SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I remember a writer friend of mine, we were mommy friends first, and then I sort of embarrassingly confessed to her that I was thinking of becoming a writer, and I had this manuscript, and she was so excited for me, and she said, oh, you have to join this organization and go to the conferences. And she had to say it 5 times because I was like, the what? That's like so hard to say. SCBWI. Wait, here, I can write it here in my comment. SCBWI. Did that work? Did everybody see, can everybody see that? Yeah. So look it up, scbwi.org. So look them up online. They have chapters all over the world, actually. And that's how I found my writer's critique group. So somebody asked, how do you find beta readers? Alyssa asked, how do you find beta readers? That's how you find a beta reader. You join a group of other writers, some of whom may be pre-published, some might be published. You get together and you basically agree to read each other's work and give honest feedback. That's a huge resource. And it wasn't until I had that group that I wrote the manuscript that got me published. SCBWI also is how I found the editor, to like a freelance editor. So it was somebody who's a writer who agrees to edit your work. So that was sort of through SCBWI, like tangentially. But another thing you could do is
I just want to recommend, before you hire a freelance editor, and if you're doing a whole manuscript, these freelance editors will charge a lot of money. Like a whole manuscript will cost about $1,200. $1,200. Yeah, I paid about, full disclosure, I paid about $1,200 for somebody to go over.
That's how desperate I was, right? I paid.
I know, me too.
After like 4 years, I was like, help.
Yeah, I mean, and somebody asked about quitting your job to be a writer full time. I am like, no, I would never recommend that, folks. I know writers who have like 10 books published and they still work full time because they have to. Like, unless you're, you know, just speaking honestly about money. Yes, unless you are a huge name within the publishing industry, you can't depend on money coming in for books. Otherwise, you will be really stressed out all the time. So, I mean, I that's why most of us have full-time jobs.
But that's a good segue, because a lot of writers end up using their ability to write to make money. So a lot of these writers, the reason I found Laura Ruby was because I took this other very small course in somebody's apartment in New York City who was a writer, and there were 3 of us, and we'd come in and we'd each read a chapter, and then she would critique our writing. And then at the end I said, you know, I think I'm at the stage where I need somebody to read my entire manuscript and give me feedback on big picture issues, not just the mechanics of my writing. And she said, try my friend Laura Ruby, because Laura Ruby was actually a guest professor at one of the Masters of Arts, Masters of Fine Arts, the MFAs, right? So there are a couple of them. There's one in Vermont. There are a bunch, but a lot of them are low residency. And so they get guest authors to cycle through. So people don't actually have to physically be there that often. You do a lot of the work online. So that's another thing. People recommended that for me, but I honestly, I didn't have time. I was a doctor. I had 3 kids. I couldn't just, go and get another master's degree, which is also quite expensive.
Yeah, I know. And I'm like, I don't have time for that either. So,
but if you do have time, and especially now if we're all in this situation where we can't go anywhere, you could consider doing something like that online, because that's like an instant community. It's an instant community of other aspiring writers and published writers who are going to be on your side and help you. But you could also just look them up and look up who the teachers are. It was my point. Like, look up who are the professors and contact them and say, hey, would you be willing to edit my piece without me having to sign up for the whole shebang?
So, I will say, like, if it's hiring somebody's not in your budget, which I, completely understand. Another thing that was incredibly helpful for me in getting published was having a critique partner. Yeah. I met my critique partner, Marie Marquardt. She's also an author here. She's got 3 books. She's here in Atlanta. We're actually are just collaborating on a new book right now that's about to go out on submission. It's going to be awesome. But I can't talk about it. So we met at a writer's conference and we clicked right away. And I had a manuscript. This is a manuscript that got rejected 200 times. And she had a manuscript that actually she got an agent and got published. It's called Dream Things Through. And we decided that we were going to become critique partners together. This was about 6 years ago. And we would meet every single week and we would exchange chapters every single week. And this is how we basically worked. We helped each other and we worked on each other's manuscripts. And we also went to writers' conferences and events together. Then a few years ago, we decided that we wanted to expand our community. So we started this meetup group at our local bookstores here in Atlanta. It's called Mingle and Margaritas. And we basically invite all the young adult and middle grade writers and authors in the Atlanta community to come in and just have a community. So these are ways that you can build your own community by taking initiative in your area. And Yvonne had a question, which publicity?
Marketing.
Let's wait on that because I want to make sure we talk about the actual, like, going from having an agent to publishing, because
here's a good question though that maybe Mayra you could answer. Christina asked, at what point do you and your agent know you should just move on because the submission isn't selling? I mean, I would say that the agent problem, that's an agent call.
So that happened to me with the first manuscript that she repped. I mean, we had talked about this could be a possibility. It is always a possibility because you just never know what editors are going to want. And her advice was always have something in the queue. So we're going on submission with this, but I need you to start working on something else. So I have always had a manuscript on, I literally right now have 3 manuscripts that I'm working on. I have 2 that are soon going to be going on submission and 1 that I have to do huge edits on, but it's drafted. It's a completely drafted manuscript. And again, the agent relationship, you need to, when you sign on with an agent, it's for your career. It's not for one book. So if one book doesn't sell, it doesn't matter. You just move on to the next one. That's why you always need to have a manuscript ready to go.
Yeah. And then there was another question. Did the agent ever tell you why they chose your manuscript? That's, I have to say, I think, I don't know if Jim ever told me specifically this, but I came to the realization because I'd been getting the feedback. My first manuscript was a little bit derivative, meaning that it was a little too similar to what was out there. And somebody else also asked, like, Jessica asked, what was the book I read? I presume the question was that I read that made me want to become a writer. And it's kind of a secret because it's a little bit embarrassing, but I'm going to own up.
50 Shades of Grey.
No, wait, but I'm going to go get it. You will
no longer be my friend.
I'm going to go get it. Hold on. I'm going to show you because I'm too embarrassed to even tell you.
So Gloria, you were asking if I have any advice for your first meeting with an agent. Yes, I would say come up with a list of questions, and I'm going to post the list of questions that I use when I do my Ask Agent session, which is going to be next week, the 25th. I'm going to post the webinar series schedule right now. And guys, just please stay updated on our website because we have a bunch more sessions coming out. We have other Musas that are creating their sessions. It's just taking a little bit for everybody to figure out what's going on. Well, so what's the book?
Okay. But can you look? Can you see what I did here? Like, look, I'm like the crazy lady who was like, I love this book. And I like went through and I tried to like figure out on my own, like, well, what did Stephanie Meyer
Oh
do?
my
Like, oh, there was like
God.
this bit. I don't even know what these mean anymore, but I did that so long ago. But
That is
yeah,
awesome. You know, I
I'm
devoured,
owning up.
yeah.
I love Twilight. I recognize it's not the best writing, perhaps, but listen, it
No,
worked for me. I loved
she
it. It
is
drew
a
me in.
freaking genius.
It made me feel what it was like to like, just like be swept into that young love romance and like the tortured lovers. I love
I
that stuff.
know. He's
Love it.
so good.
I
And
totally
I'm
love it.
like, I totally like
Now
I
you
read
guys
the
are all
whole
like
series in two
signing
weeks.
off. You're like, oh my God, she's crazy. We don't want to listen anymore from her.
Yeah. Okay, so once we got that book deal, we would just want to go because we have 10 minutes. The time is just like just ran by, but we want to talk about what it's like to get a book deal. What is the timeline once you get a book deal?
Yeah.
And answer your questions about publishing and marketing and publishing and all that stuff. Oh, Jessica, I love you. Yes, that's great. So once Ismée, tell us about once you got the book deal, what happened?
Okay, so I'll tell you about my first book, Water and May. So I think I signed on with the agent in October. By January. So when you sign with the agent, even, again, you're going to want to try and have your manuscript as polished and as perfect as possible because you're showing the agent your best, the best that you can do, right? So you're going to make sure you have everybody that you know has read it, given you feedback. All of that is done. You give it to the agent. They love it. They want to represent you. But even then, they're going to have some ideas for some subtle changes, depending on the agent. Some agents are more editorial than others, but chances are they might have some at least tweaks that they're going to want you to implement before they put it out on submission. So Jim had a couple of suggestions. I took those suggestions, and then the manuscript was ready to go out on submission in January. Also, agents know things like, Christmas time, holiday break, not a good time for submission. So we're going to wait, and we're not going to do the first week of January. We're going to do like the second or third. I forget, but he had he knows the business end of things much better than I do. So he knows who to submit to, who's looking for a book like this, and why. Oh, but also to answer the question of why he picked the book. I think so. My first manuscript was a little bit Twilighty, right? It was a little bit too similar to that. And so then but I loved it. I wasn't ready to give it up. Like, it took me 5 years to get over that first manuscript that I wrote to be able to write something else. I felt like I was cheating on it to even think of writing something else. But and then I wrote something that only I could write. Water and May was a story about a 15-year-old Dominican American girl in Washington Heights who wants to have a baby more than anything, so someone in her family will finally love her. And I came up with that idea as I was like switching from writer mode to doctor mode, literally on the subway, going up on that crazy tuberculator elevator at 168th Street. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to write this story because I've lived this story so many times. I've had a dozen young women in high school who've been pregnant with fetuses that have had major heart problems. And I've seen them go through this journey. It's a coming of age journey, and it's pretty specific. And I was thinking, it's unlikely someone has already written this story. This is a story perhaps only I can write. And as it so happens, because I'm my mother's Cuban and I speak Spanish, most of my patients are Dominican American and they speak Spanish. And so I actually made the character a young Dominican American woman because that was who a lot of my patients are. And so I think the novelty of the story was what got me the agents and the editor, because nobody had told that story before.
That's a great point, to try to find something that you're passionate about and what can you write? What can you bring to the table that is unique? Like with Salty Bittersweet, like I am super passionate about food, about family, family relationships. And I used a lot of my own experiences to create the drama in the book and to create the feeling, the emotion behind the book. Like I said, Salty Bittersweet is about 17-year-old aspiring chef. I call it a foodie, a YA foodie romance. It's got a lot of awesome descriptions. I love to travel, so the book has a lot of different set in different locations. So I'm gonna run real quick because we have about 6 minutes left to go. So basically, like I said, I know it's gone by fast. So basically we went out, my first manuscript that went on submission did not sell, so I was working on this book while the other one was going on submission. So I had this book ready. My agent and I went over several rounds of edits, and just keep in mind, when a debut author goes to a publisher, they don't want to do a lot of work. And we actually have a session, a webinar session coming up with my editor at Blank HarperCollins, and she can answer a lot of these questions, but they want to pick up something from a debut that is pretty much ready to go and doesn't need a lot of work. So you're going to do a lot of the edits with your agent. So what does that mean? So you're going to spend all this time working on your manuscript. So you better freaking be in love with the story, because you're going to read that whole book 100,000 times. Then, so it goes out of submission. Hopefully your agent will give you a list of the publishing houses and the people that that it went to, and if they're, and what their reaction was, if they're reading, if they're interested. I usually also do my own research, and I will send a list of people, of editors, to my agent to say, hey, can we please make sure that we're sending the manuscript to these folks? And then
that's good. I never did that. That's not a bad idea.
I always do that. You know, there's people like my work is own voices, and I connect with a lot of people in the Latinx community. So I just want to make sure that I'm targeting, that I'm sending my work to those editors. Mm-hmm. So then what happens? So we hear back, and sometimes you hear back that, and this was my situation, I heard back from both HarperCollins and Penguin. We got a HarperCollins offer on the table. It was ready to go. The Penguin folks just needed more time to go through their acquisitions process, which is very freaking long and convoluted, and you just have no clue what's going on. And then we just went with the offer that we had on the table because it was a great offer. So once that happened, we signed the contract. We talked to the editor. I wanted to see what their marketing plans for the book were, what their editorial vision for the book was. Once we signed the contract, I turned in the manuscript. Once I turned in the manuscript, I got an editorial letter back with the changes that they wanted me to do. And the manuscript was, there were notes on the manuscript for me to make changes. Then I worked on that, and I turned in the revisions, and we did 3 rounds of revisions. Once the manuscript got accepted, it went to copy it. No, we did the inclusivity readers report. So before I went to copy it, I actually got an inclusivity reader report. Ismée, do you want to explain very briefly?
Sure. So sometimes they're referred to as sensitivity readers, sometimes they're inclusivity readers. So I actually had 3 for my latest book. This train is being held, one of whom was a psychologist. So this train is being held is about 2 New York City teens, a baseball prodigy, Alex, Dominican American from Washington Heights. His father wants him to go pro. He maybe wants to be a poet. Isa would love to go pro, to be a professional ballerina, but her Cuban-born mother thinks that's an unacceptable career choice for a modern woman. And also she doesn't want her daughter dating Latinos. And Isa's from the Upper East Side. So and there's elements of mental illness as well in it, because Isa's family struggles with job loss in her father, and also her brother has bipolar disorder. And so I have, because I'm a physician, I have psychiatry friends and psychology friends who I use to conduct research. And also I have a personal connection, through my best friend's family about this. But so I had my own people helping me make sure that I was accurately depicting what this would look like. But we also had an independent psychologist who didn't know me, who perhaps, because sometimes when you get somebody who knows you, maybe they're going to be nicer to you. They don't want to actually offend you.
Those people do not.
So you want someone who's completely objective and unbiased. So we had a psychologist read it. And that was Abrams, the editors wanted to do that, which I thought was great. I was like, sure, please, yes, do that. So depending on what you're writing, you might want to get viewpoints to make sure that you're accurately depicting, if it's all different sorts of different characteristics.
Yes, and in a moment of unabashed, just total truth and honesty, I broke down crying and sobbing when I read my first sensitivity report, because what they do is, one of the things that they do is they point out things about race and your background and identity, and if sometimes it feels, because it's your work and it's your art, it feels very personal, and they don't hold back. They just kind of go for it and just tell you pretty much, this is everything in your book that could be considered problematic, so you just really have to address those things, and it is brutal. But you get through it with the help of that awesome writer authors community. I remember when it happened, I called you, Ismée, and you gave me some great advice. And we just, that really helped me get through it. So once we put in all of those changes into the manuscript, and the manuscript gets accepted, that's what they call it. Another check goes out from your advance, and it goes into line edits and copy edits. And once those are done, then you get what is called an advanced reader copy. And that advanced reader copy starts going out to influencers, to book reviewers, all kinds of folks. And even after the advanced reader copies have gone out, we still had another round of copy edits, final copy edits that would go. And then by the end, once that round is copy edits, then you get your finished book, and you have your awesome
hopefully with no typos, right?
Yes. Hopefully with no typos, because by now you've read this book probably 500 times. I'm not even joking. So this is why I'm telling you.
Which makes it more likely you're going to miss the typo, by the way. That's why you need fresh eyes.
Yes. And then, you can do all those awesome unboxing videos. Somebody was asking, Safira, when you are submitting a new manuscript, does it have to be published by the same publisher as your debut? That completely depends on your contract. And that is a good question for the agents that we have coming in next week. Any contract questions would be great. I want to make sure I'm going through that we've answered all of your questions.
How much time do we have? When does it end?
We're over time, but if people want to hang on, we'll be happy to answer as many questions as we can. Do you want to talk real quick about publicity and what we're doing with Las Musas?
Yes. So someone, Yvonne asked about publicity marketing methods that we love most for the books. So to be quite honest, what I personally like the best is connecting with readers and other authors that, ideally that would be in person at a book festival, but we can also do it online, which is why we're doing this now. And so for Las Musas, we are doing many more webinars. There's a lot of talk, so not all of the webinars are on our site yet. So keep checking back, because there's going to be webinars for picture book. I think there was discussion about having one for mental health, which I think we could all take some self-care with mental health right about now. So we will have more coming your way to try and connect, again, authors with readers and just with our love of books and publishing. In terms of other publicity marketing methods, ones that I think work really well are word of mouth. So if you get readers who are passionate about your work and they tell their friends, honestly, what makes you pick up a book? Is it, it's often, it's like if somebody you trust says, you've got to read this book, it's really good. And then that's what makes me pick up a book. So if you like an author's work and you want to promote them, tell your friends to read it, honestly, or write a review on Amazon or Goodreads or any of those online forums. Those are all incredibly helpful, which is something I did not know until after I had published my first book, and other people were saying, oh, you need the Amazon reviews. I was like, why? And they said, oh, well, then Amazon will promote your book for you if you get over 50. And I was like, what? No way.
Yeah, so in Amazon, 50 is the magic number. I thought it was all a joke until I got an actual email from my publisher saying, hey, can you please ask folks that that order the book on Amazon to review it, because we need over 50 reviews. I'm like, oh, so it is true.
But you don't need to order it on Amazon. You can write a review for any product on Amazon, even if you didn't order it. If you've ordered it on Amazon, they flag it as a verified purchase review.
Okay. So yeah.
But you can buy it from your favorite local indie bookstore, which we need to support them now also, because they're all struggling just like everybody. So if you have a local bookstore that you love, call them up and have them mail it to you. You don't even have to go in.
So if you read our books, please go ahead and leave a review on Goodreads and Amazon. Heck, even bad reviews are good reviews because they still work with our, you know, they still
Although
help our
I will
numbers.
never leave a bad review. I feel like that's just not right.
I know.
If I read something and I really have nothing nice to say about it, I just won't review it. But oftentimes you can find something. There's like something in there that you like.
I agree. I will say, guys, like being on the other side of a bad review, it is the fucking worst. I'm just gonna be honest. It sucks.
It can be, but you remember you're not supposed to look at your reviews. That's the thing. And I did not know that after my first book, but you know, both my agent and my publishers were like, "What are you doing? Why are you reading?
I know.
You're never supposed to read reviews because it can make you so upset." So they're like, "Don't look, don't look." So yeah, that's what I do. I don't look.
Okay, guys.
You can write whatever you want. I would never know what you wrote. So
we love you. We are sending you lots of prayers. I am lighting candles, you know, my little Buddhist shrine here for you guys. Please stay safe, you know, be kind, care for your families, for your loved ones, you know, try to do a little bit of self-care, you know, meditation, yoga, go for a walk, whatever you can do.
And stay connected with your family, even if you can't visit them because you're protecting abuelita, you don't want to get her sick, call her, FaceTime. That's what every day we have somebody that we're FaceTiming with as a family, and the kids are trying to stay connected. It's a challenging time, but we will all get through this together.
And please help us promote the webinar series. You know, we're both on social media and we're online. If you have any more questions, just shoot us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Again, thank you so much. Please stay safe.
Bye, everybody.
And we hope to see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.